right. Good morning, and thank you for joining our Biz Buy Sell webinar. My name is Jennifer Von Lindern, and I am the West Coast Territory Representative. We are very pleased to have you all join us for today's presentation on how to pre-screen willing, ready, and qualified business buyers. It is with great pleasure to introduce you to my friend and colleague, founder of Sunbelt Business Advisors, IBBA educator, recipient of the Tom West Award, Mr. Len Krick.
Hey, thank you, Jennifer. So this is the third of our series, and let's get right into it. Nice to have you on, everybody. Hope your weather is better than ours. We finally got rain in Las Vegas. I think we have the entire annual rainfall in one day. Okay, so this material was written by me based on my personal experience, right? I wrote everything in here. And I was chairman of IBBA's education committee for many years, and I wrote and rewrote the courses, many of the courses, migrated to online delivery and so forth. In fact, you can go on the IBBA and buy some of those courses. I now have I now train new business brokers using a system I call Fast Start Business Brokerage Coaching System. So in the past two webinars, in September, I did one called How to Write an Effective Internet Advertisement. Pretty sure that's still available from Biz Buy Sell. If not, let us know. And in that, we talked about a 7-step process for writing effective ads. First, write the presentation of the business, right? That is the CBR or the SIM. Write that first. Then make a list of the highlights or attributes of the business. What makes the business attractive or sets it apart from similar businesses? Write an effective headline ad, for the thing. Draft the internet ad copy. Use Microsoft Word so you can use spell check and word count. Try to limit it to 1,500 or less characters and spaces. Then let it sit overnight. Come back, review and edit it if necessary, then send it to your client for approval before rolling it out. Trust me, your client will find things sometimes that you didn't think of. Little revealing things that blow confidentiality. Have your client sign off on your ad, okay? Plus 2 heads are better than 1, especially your client's head is really good, right? So in February, we did the next step, how to respond to buyer inquiries in 5 minutes or less using a streamlined system. And basically the quick response system is, number 1, you receive the buyer inquiry. Number 2, click on the buyer's email address that's on the buyer inquiry, so you don't have to type it. 3, type the subject line. 4, copy and paste the message that you have pre-prepared and it's in your file under that listing or under current listings. And step 5, attach the documents to the response and then out the door. So it's very important to respond to buyer inquiries as quickly as you possibly can. Not only do they go away, but they often complain to Biz Buy Sell. The number 1 complaint they have is the brokers do not respond timely. You need to do that. I know that's one of our things we don't do very well as business brokers is do things in a timely fashion, but you need to learn how to do that. So here are the supporting documents to this webinar. They're going to be available from Biz Buy Sell after the webinar. A PDF of this PowerPoint presentation, a recording of the webinar that we're doing right now for future reference, right? A buyer profile, that's a document for an individual. A buyer profile for a company or corporation, that's also a document. And a buyer's disclosure statement. Now, let me go back to this right here. Notice it says, Biz Buy Sell webinar attendees have permission, because this is a question I get all the time, to use these contents, the supporting documents, right, with this webinar, but you can't claim authorship. So in other words, go ahead and use what I give you, these documents. So here's what we're going to go over. Buyer basics, pre-screening the buyer, buyer profile for a person, buyer profile for a company, the next step, and buyer's disclosure statement. What? Buyer's disclosure statement. That's interesting, huh? And you hear the word vet all the time, vetting, right? It's a verb, to vet, okay, to verify suitability. That's what we're doing. We're vetting the buyers. So here's some basics. Let's just start with that. What is a buyer? Here's how I refer to someone who may buy a business. First, they're called a buyer inquiry. Okay, they became aware of the business, that the business was for sale. They made an inquiry and expressed an interest in learning more. That's what we focused on in February, the webinar. Okay, then they become a buyer prospect. How do they do that? They complete and return the buyer profile and the confidentiality or an NDA, okay, agreement. And are they ready, willing, and able? If they meet the minimum buyer standards for this transaction, then they receive a presentation and valuation for the business, right? The CBR, SIM, and the valuation. That's the focus of this webinar. When do they become a buyer? When they return those things, the completed and everything, they're a buyer prospect. When they discuss the business with me, the business broker, met with my seller in person or by Zoom or telephonically, came and toured the business. Now, have you ever sold a business where the person has never visited the business? Trust me, I've had some people. I had a guy from Montana who said, I don't need to come see this business. I've got your CBR. I can imagine it. And all that. No. Make them come and see the business. Trust me. Not only do you want to have skin in the deal, but it's dangerous to sell something sight unseen. It gets into court. I don't think the judge would like that very much, right? So they tour the business and they make a written offer on the business. Okay, that's when they become a buyer. Before that, they're a buyer inquiry. Maybe they become a buyer prospect. Now let's take a look at this. Okay, so I talk about maintaining parity. What I mean is every time the buyer prospects want something from you, you want something in return, right? The only thing they're going to get for free from me is the generic information about the business on the internet, or a teaser, or a direct solicitation letter. Okay, that's all they're getting for free. To get any more, you want information about them and you want to sign confidentiality or non-disclosure agreement. If they don't do that, they can sit in the corner until they're good. They're not getting anything from me. I'm the gatekeeper to my client. Okay. Later, talk about maintaining parity. You want them to spend time to visit the business. You want to make a written offer. You want an earnest money deposit in most cases, not always, right? So it's always a quid pro quo. Every time they want something, you want something from them. It might be their time, it might be some money, it might be a signature, whatever. Maintain parity, okay? And you are the gatekeeper, you're the quarterback, and you maintain control of all plays. So let's talk about buyer dropout. You know, along the way, buyers drop out of the process. Duh, right? Everybody knows that. First, they make an inquiry, right? But only about 50% of them, in my experience, complete and return the confidentiality agreement that I asked them to do. So 50% went away. And I jokingly said to some of the folks at Biz Buy Sell, I can kind of almost predict when they're going to be somebody who doesn't return a confidentiality agreement. If you take a look at the time, okay, that they filled out, that they did the request for information. And if it's 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, they were probably had nothing better to do. Maybe they were high or drunk or something, and they just decided to look at businesses, and you're never going to hear from them again. So they're not really a buyer. They're just a looky-loo, right? So, okay, so now let's say they completely return the confidentiality agreement, right? And the buyer profile. About 30% of them drop out from there, okay, of the total 100% drop out because really they can't really prove they're ready, willing, and able to purchase the business, okay? And then once you determine that they are, about 20% more of them drop out after they receive information out the business. Maybe I never hear from them again, or they tell me I'm just not interested, okay? So only about 5% make a written offer on the business that they inquired about way back in the beginning, right? So that means that 95% of them did not. Okay, so you'll see where when you are pre-screening or vetting the buyer, it's important to get information about them and their interests, because it could be that of those 95% that don't make an offer on the business that they inquired about, that you might have something else suitable for them, right? Or if they're not ready, willing, and able on that one. You might find something that fits them. So let's talk about buyer response. The number of buyer inquiries you get from a biz buy sell ad on a specific ad can vary widely depending upon various facts, including the type of business and whether you included a second standard industry code. So in other words, you could broaden out the number of responses. You can increase that by, as we said in the very first webinar, by including a secondary as long as in addition to the primary industry code. The location of the business, okay, the pricing, how you priced it, the terms. Remember, in business brokerage, it's not just price, it's always price and terms. Let me give you an illustration. I can sell a business for $1 million tomorrow morning that's only worth $500 on the valuation all day long. I can do that by tomorrow morning if I offer $1 down and $1 a day for the rest of your life. Okay, the universe of buyers is almost infinite then. So the price was $1 million, it was twice the price, but the terms were so favorable. I know that's a ridiculous thing, but I'm just showing there's definitely price and terms. Okay, the key words in the title. Okay, let's go back to terms. Okay, what I meant by that is there's a significant increase in buyer inquiries if you offer, I don't mean sell it on carry, but offer to carry. Remember, that's on a case-by-case basis at the seller's sole option, whether the terms, you always put those words in there. If you have carry as an option, put on a case-by-case basis at the seller's sole option. Because at that point, my client turns into Seller National Bank. And then you think that's going to be an easy loan to get? Yeah, probably not quite as hard as an SBA loan, but there's going to be a lot you have to prove to my client that you are worthy, right? How about the key words in the title? Oh yeah, that's very important to get in responses, right? Because that's the words they search by. How about whether you included a photo? You have significantly increased buyer response if you include a thumbnail photo. Okay, quality, and if you're going to breach confidentiality by showing the front end of the business, just get a stock photo and put it in, okay, of whatever it is, the product or service. Quality of the ad copy or teaser. That's why we did webinar number 1 to show you how to write an effective ad copy, right? And the time on the market. Those are the things that really determine buyer response. In my market, which happens to be Las Vegas, Nevada, we consistently averaged over 20 inquiries per listing. I understand that in other markets, the average is lower. It depends on your market, right? How much demand there is, how many people want to move into your market. I can say that with absolute certainty that I always spend much more time working with buyers than I do with my own client. I mean, if I have 20 of them, now 10 of them never, I had the inquiry, but 10 of them went away when I asked for them to do something, right? So, but I spend a lot more time than I do with my own client. Let's talk about pre-screening the buyer. So the first thing is set up buyer standards. You and your client and some third parties, as we'll see, should set minimum standards regarding who you will allow to review proprietary information about the business you're representing. Everyone has heard the vague standards for a buyer, right? And that's ready, willing, and able. Let's talk about that in context of business brokerage. What is ready? What is the buyer's horizon to buy? We'll talk about that later. If they do not plan to purchase the business in the next 3 months, forget it. They're not a buyer. They're looky-loo at this point, right? Willing. If they refuse to complete and return the buyer profile and confidentiality agreement, right? Then they're not willing, right? They're not willing buyer. Move on to a real buyer. Don't waste your time. Now, there are some exceptions to that. If they don't initially respond, or the only response you have in 6 months, you might want to go back and browse them and say, hey, you expressed interest, do a second round on that. Able, ready, willing, and able. Do they have the financial ability to conclude this transaction? Do they have enough operating capital? We all think about, do you have enough money to buy the business? But some businesses take quite a bit in operating capital. Do they have that? Can they provide Proof of funds, okay? Where, in what form is the capital that you have? How much liquidity? What form is it? How, when can it be available? How much are you willing to put into this business on a down payment and working capital? Can they qualify for an SBA loan? If they've defaulted on an SBA loan, they're not going to get another one. Can they qualify for the lease? Assuming it's a leased facility. What's their credit score? Okay, do they have the business acumen to train properly and take over this business, especially if they're seller carry? That's important, right? So your seller national bank gets paid. So there are third-party standards as well. Before you go to market, you should find out who else will be qualifying to buy a prospect, right? Okay. Remember, I say qualifying, right? Why? Because they actually do qualifications. What do? We pre-screen. And what their minimum standards are. For example, SBA lenders, right? The lender will have borrower requirements, usually expressed in a FICO score and adequate prior experience and all those kinds of things. How about the landlord? They'll have new tenant requirements, won't they? And you need to find out what those are. Government agencies have licensing requirements. Some people won't meet those requirements. Franchisors have new franchisee requirements, usually expressed in, can they speak English? If it's that kind of franchise, can they speak English adequately to do the customer relations and service on their end, and go through the training, compulsory training? Do they have, what is their, do they meet the minimum net worth requirements and liquidity requirements? Okay. Remember, that might be different for a sale of an ongoing franchise versus a new franchise. So you have to ask the franchisor what those qualifications are. So there are third parties. If they're going to be involved in this transaction, you have to pre-screen to those standards as well. And every one of those, including the government agencies, are happy that you, a professional business broker, are involved in this transaction, because they know at least we have a pro, that is leading the fight here. And that you're going to pre-screen these people and not waste everybody's time with people who don't meet those standards. So let's talk about pre-screening the buyers. Business brokers do not qualify the buyers. Okay, you're qualified. No. Claiming that a buyer is qualified can come back to haunt you in court, for sure. We do not know if they are qualified to what? Manage the business and the staff, market the business and maintain good customer relations, provide sufficient working capital, etc. Okay, we don't know that. What we know is what they told us. What do? Yes, we do pre-screen the buyers to a standard which allows us to determine if we and our client should spend any more time with them. All right, so just get the word qualify, lose that from your vocabulary when it comes to, business brokerage. So let's talk about the buyer profile for a person, okay? It's different than for a company. The objectives. Buyer profile form is used to collect information about the buyer prospect, and there are two primary objectives. Number one is to determine if the buyer meets the pre-screening standards for the business about which they inquired. Right? If they either do not meet the standards or they decide not to move forward with the business about which they inquired, then the second objective of buyer profile is to identify other business listings you should present to them now or in the future for which they do meet minimum standards. Okay? Remember that only about 5% of the buyer prospects purchase the business about which they inquired. So let's look at this buyer profile, which you have a copy of. This happens to be a fillable PDF version. As discussed in February webinar, we use this form to pre-screen a person. A copy of this form is included, right? This form is often used as the input sheet for a contact record management system. This fillable PDF might be able to be linked to a CRM, which would even eliminate the time for separate input of all this data, okay? Depends on the system you're using and so forth, but I can tell you these are the input fields for a good CRM for a buyer. So let's take a look at it, starting at the top. The buyer completes this form and returns it to you along with an executed confidentiality or NDA. Okay. So here's what it is. Obviously, it's important to obtain the complete contact information for the buyer. So it's just the normal stuff, right? Representative is your name, by the way. Office is your office. If you're single office, you can obviously change this form to fit you. Put your name on it. Put your, things that work for you. Notice it says information be kept confidential and used for no other purpose. We're not going to publish this information that they give us in this buyer profile. Now, people often ask me, it's not on the slide here, but people often ask me, do you share this with your client? No. Okay, I don't share it with my client, but if my client asks for a copy, he knows what I'm asking for, but if he asks and he says, I'd like to see the buyer profile on that, I go back to the person who filled this out, the buyer prospect, okay, and I ask him, is it okay to show my client your buyer profile? He's asking about your qualifications. And especially if they're going to be asking for a carry, trust me, they'll say yes. Okay. If they say no, then we have kind of a problem, right? So it's important to get this contact information and everything else that's on this form. Okay, this section identifies what they're looking for and what they're not interested in, right? Why they want to buy a business and their background. So what business or businesses did you contact us about? Now that seems goofy because you're obviously right then and there, you know why you're sending this to them, you know what they inquired about, but later on or in your CRM, okay, it might be a good idea to find out how did we find these people? What did they contact us about initially and so forth. So I found that that's a pretty important thing to put in, okay? And usually we do it by the title or the headline or or the listing number. Okay, that's because they remember they fill this in. Sometimes we have to go in and fix it when they get it back from. What types of businesses would you have interest in? What types of businesses would you not have interested in? Right? Okay. The reason I'm interested in buying a business is because I want to work or own a business. I call it American Dream Part 2, own your own business. American Dream Part 1, own your own house. Right? As an investment. Well, if they check as an investment, then I need to find something with self-contained management and everything, right? Increase my income, okay? To expand my current business, okay? So to grow through acquisition instead of organically. And then any other reason they're interested in buying a business, okay? The reason I want to buy a business at this time, by the way, other might be, I'm interested in buying a business because I want to set my son up in a business, something like that. Okay, the reason I want to buy a business at this time, I sold my business, I'm selling my business, I got laid off, I get that sometimes. It's my life's dream. I just received some cash. For example, sometimes they hit the lottery or they get an inheritance or something like that. Okay, what is your background and current employment? A lot of them, now obviously if they say, I just lost my job, I'm not employed, that's why I'm looking for a business. So they're looking to buy themselves a job. And there are a lot of businesses like that out there, especially franchises that are a business in a box. Maybe they're not very entrepreneurial, but they can execute and they can run a business. Have you ever owned a business before? Yes or no? If so, what type? Declared personal bankruptcy? Yes or no? When? Explain. Oh, well, I had to declare personal bankruptcy because my wife got brain cancer and we got a $4 million bill from the hospital. Okay, trust me, even the SBA guys understand medical bankruptcies. Had a judgment against you, yes or no, and when, okay? Are you interested in working in the business day to day? Yes, no, I don't care. A cash business, okay, so we don't usually have very many cash businesses because they have a lot of unreported income. A cash business is something like vending, coin-operated laundromat, self-service car washes, some bars, some pizza places, whatever. They're all cash. They don't report most of their income. So we usually don't take those listings because we can't prove the cash. We can't get them paid for. I always tell them I can't steal it twice, right? You already didn't report it. You got the tax benefits. Now you're asking to sell your business and get paid for unreported cash. Okay, a home business, a home-based business. We're getting that obviously a lot right now. I have sold some fantastic home-based business. I'm not talking about Mary Kay Cosmetics. I mean, and they're not sales oriented. Fantastic home-based businesses that just were especially good for people who have physical handicaps. Okay, a national franchise, yes or no? A relocatable business. So portability and scalability are very important. Okay, a turnaround or distressed business. Now, if they say that, well, we don't really take turnaround listings. Right? So we would refer the buyer to the local turnaround management association guys. and hopefully they'll fix it up and get it back to us, or at least they'll refer somebody to us. Okay. So that's the area that talks about what they're interested in, what they want, why they want, and what their background is. So this question allows the business broker to determine this right here in the middle, to determine if this is a real buyer prospect or a looky-loo, somebody whose hobby is looking at businesses and wasting you and your client's time. When are you planning to buy a business? Now, 3 to 6 months, over 6 months, annual income. I call this the buyer's horizon to buy. Okay, if the buyer does not plan to purchase a business in 3 months or less, stop. Tell them that none of your listings are likely to be available at that point. You're not going to hold a listing for them. Suggest that they concentrate on getting ready to buy a business. For example, they should check their credit rating, check their credit report, get junk off if it's not theirs, increase their cash so they have more liquidity. If they need to sell their house to be able to have the cash down payment, start selling it, right? Obviously, the annual amount of income that a buyer prospect must generate from a business is a major factor in determining, that's this annual income needed on the right-hand side, a major factor in determining a business that's right for them. If they say they need $100,000, do not show them something that last year brought SDE, seller's discretionary earnings, to the bottom line to service debt of $60,000. Okay, just forget it. Doesn't match their criteria. Find something that does. Okay, or ask them, why did you inquire about this? Because this doesn't meet your criteria, right? This question here, how long, right, also allows the business broker to determine if they're a real buyer prospect or looky-loo. How long have you been looking? Okay, if a buyer has been looking, right, for over 6 months, they are a low probability buyer prospect. Let's face it. And, they're looking for the perfect business and will never make a decision, right? And a perfect business is no employees, no inventory, no accounts receivable, $1 down, $1 a day, whatever. Invest $100,000 to make $100,000 in annual cash flow. And I always tell them, if I had a business that met those criteria, I would have already bought it myself. All right, this section allows the business broker to determine if the buyer prospect has financial capability to buy the business, the source of funding, and who else is involved in financing or operating the business. Okay, so it's who will help you run the business? Nobody, a partner, a friend, relative, spouse, children, whatever. Okay, how will you finance their total investment? In cash, bank loan. And if they say bank loan, I go into this whole dissertation about with them later when I talk to them about there are no conventional loans unless you put a significant amount of collateral in addition to what the assets of the business. SBA loan. Okay, so if they say SBA loan, then I only show businesses that I have pre-qualified with a preferred lender for an SBA loan. A private investor, family. How's your credit? I don't know. Excellent. All this stuff. Your FICO score. It is very important. See where it says, how will you finance? Well, let's say they say private investor or family, or they're going to have somebody help them run this business. Important to identify the other people who are involved in making the decision whether to purchase the business or run it as early as possible in the process. Get that person involved in the discussions immediately. This will save a lot of time of yours and your client's time. And my advice is try to do the dance once, because there's a lot of buyers out there. Okay, so try to do it once, don't repeat performance. All right, and then from 2000 to 2007, we required the buyer prospects to complete a separate thing called a confidential financial statement, which is a real net worth statement like you'd see from a CPA. We found it was just too early in the process and that many buyer prospects refused to complete it. So we truncated it to the following format at the bottom of this buyer profile form. I didn't say it wasn't important, but it's not, you want to get some response. So you need to do this. Okay, so here are their assets, here are their liabilities in general, and then assets minus liabilities equal approximate net worth. And then they certify the information is true. A lot of times it's not. That's okay. And that's interesting. Hold on for a second. Forgot to turn my phone off, folks. Sorry about that. Call you later. Okay, so I recommend that you use DocuSign or some other digital signature thing, the product that's out there, for them to sign this when they send it back, because they're undersigned certifies the information was provided by them and true as correct. Okay, let's talk about a buyer profile for a company. Okay, especially private equity groups and stuff. All right. Now, this form, I developed this form over a long period of time, talking to many private equity groups. And here's what you need. Okay. So it's based on the relevant information required to pre-screen a company, a strategic buyer, or a private equity group. Okay, and it looks like this. We're going to go over it in a minute. As with the prior forms, this form is often used as the input sheet for a CRM, right? All right, so the top part is who they are and who the contact person is, the company name and all that. Okay, and their website and all that. Okay, and up here, this up in the right-hand corner, that's your name, your phone number, your fax number. We use digital faxes sometimes. You'd be surprised how many people are still using faxes. Email. Okay. Oh, your email. Okay. Number 2. So that's section 1. Section 2 is the company or private equity group's deal history, right? What they did and how much they acquired and what the price and all that location. Okay. Section 3 is the company's private equity groups or private equity groups financial information. And they will give you this, their financial reference, so-and-so at such and such a place. And right here, the company that they're with, their phone number, their fax number. Are they publicly traded? Yes or no? If so, what's a symbol, right? Exchange. You can go look them up, right? Liabilities, assets, net worth of the company. Okay. Number 4 is the company's or private equity group's target criteria. Okay. So what states or regions? Revenue range, transaction value. That's the total amount they're going to pay from this to that. Okay, so if they're looking for something that's at least $5 million to $15 million, right? That's their criteria. Minimum EBITDA, minimum sales, like revenue, right? Annual sales. Present management, do they need to continue or can they transition out? And then SIC codes of what they're looking for, they're searching for at that point in time. Trust me, they change like every second. You know, one minute they're looking for pharmaceuticals, the next time they're looking for something else. And then use DocuSign or something else. So those are the 2 profiles that I've honed down and I use. And when you hit a company with one of these and ask them to fill it out, okay, obviously you're going to have them do a confidentiality agreement as well. You build respect with them because they know you're a professional business broker and you need this information. They know why you need it, okay? So they'll give it to you, or they'll point you to a website that has all that on it or whatever. A lot of times they'll have a sheet that already has all that stuff and send it to you. What's the next step? All right. Once the buyer returns the completed buyer profile and confidentiality agreement, you should, number 1, set them up as a buyer prospect in your system, right? Number 2, store the documents. 3, review the responses, obviously. And 4, make an assessment of whether they meet the minimum standards. Are they ready, willing, and able? If they do meet those, then respond as soon as possible by email or telephone. Send them a confidentiality business review, a confidential business review, CBR, or a SIM, right? Okay, if they've met your criteria. If they do not at that point, you need to stop. Respond as soon as possible by telephone, and I would. Okay, you can do it by email, but I would do it by telephone. Let them know that you represent the seller, and with some finesse, you know, you guys, you know, I know you're not good at finesse, but try to get some finesse. You know, let them know that they do not appear to be able to fund the deal. Discuss alternative opportunities or funding sources with them. Okay. So next thing is using a buyer's disclosure statement. This is actually our last chapter here. Okay. Buyers, what is a buyer's disclosure statement? All right. So here's a generic one, which I also have a copy for you. Okay. After reviewing the buyer profile and speaking with the buyer prospect, right, in some circumstances, you need to have them sign a buyer's disclosure statement document, right? This informs the seller of any material facts about the buyer's past. So depending on when, you might do this at different times. It might not be right away. It might be, you know, a little bit down the road when you start to talk to the buyer a little bit. Okay. So the buyer should complete and sign this and submit it when what? When over 50% carried, when the buyer is proposing that the seller carry a large promissory note, particularly if the price includes accounts receivable. Okay, everybody know probably why I said that. If it's accounts receivable is included in the purchase price, then basically there, you know, if you take the 100%, let's say 30% of his accounts receivable. Okay, so that's money that's going to come in. Now you've carried 50%. If you look at that, you only have 20% exposure there if you're the buyer, and you could probably liquidate the whole thing and walk away from it and make money. I mean, the scam artists use this. All right. If the offer is contingent upon the buyer obtaining an SBA loan, okay, you probably need a buyer's disclosure statement signed to see if they're a convicted felon and all that stuff. If it's suspected that the buyer may have some skeletons in their closet or intentionally misrepresenting facts or is a fraud or a scam artist. And we have had one that actually made 60 minutes one time. Okay. And he and his mother went to prison, but they were sure seemed like a real buyer to us. But we had this buyer disclosure statement signed by them and it hung them in court. Okay, trust me. And we had no broker liability on it because we got him to do this disclosure statement. So here are the questions. Have you ever been subject of any bankruptcy filing, assignment for benefit of creditors, or insolvency procedures of any kind for the last 5 years, or consulted with an attorney or advisor regarding such proceedings? Have you been late, defaulted on a business premises or equipment leases? Have you ever had an SBA loan, guaranteed loan? Have you ever defaulted on an SBA guaranteed loan? Why do I say that? Because if they have, they can't get another one. Okay. Is there anything about your personal or business operating or credit history that, if disclosed to the seller, might adversely affect the seller's decision to sell the business to you? Are there any representations you made to the seller regarding your financial statement, experience, education that are not true? Is there any reason you would not be able to investigate the suitability and performance of this business yourself? If yes, please name the independent advisors you intend to use in assisting you in this investigation. Right? Is there any reason that you will not have sufficient operating capital for the business after paying the down payment and closing costs? Is there any reason you might not be denied if any necessary licenses or permits to operate this business? You know, if let's say it's a bar and you have to get a liquor license. Okay, have you been denied one of those? You might not get one. Have you been convicted of a felony? Is there any person or entity other than who you will have interest in the business? In other words, who else is involved in this you haven't disclosed to us? Are your funds for the down payment, closing costs, operating capital available now in liquid form without borrowing or obtaining funds from another source? Right? Are there any other facts or conditions not disclosed above that might adversely affect your ability to operate the business or prevent you from fulfilling the terms of your purchase agreement? Okay, so if they've answered yes to any of these, I have to give an explanation. Okay, and on the next page, it looks like this. They can, for each question that they said yes on, they can explain. Doesn't mean they're not going to be, it means they've disclosed to you. Doesn't mean, right? So they sign and date the buyer's disclosure statement indicating receipt of the document. Okay, the seller does. Okay, the seller's national bank relies upon these representations of the borrower when deciding if they will accept any carryback. A copy of the buyer's disclosure form and stuff is available with this form here, is available with this webinar. Okay, and just a little plug here before we get on to questions, because that's it for the webinar. Okay, so I have this fast track coaching program that you might be interested in or know someone who is. Okay, it's a custom program. This is a one-on-one, okay, based on a broker's experience level. I think I've done 49 of these so far, something, and market. There are 14 two-hour one-on-one coaching sessions delivered by GoToWebinar, custom marketing plan developed for the broker's office and market. All supporting materials are ready to implement. Access to this huge reference library that I have and all the checklists and templates and all this kind of stuff that I developed over the last 23 years. It covers Main Street mainly. If you want an M&A, great, or both, and the price is a flat $5,000. This is for a one-on-one coaching. Okay, I also have a new coaching program that's going to be online delivery that I'm rolling out at the IBBA conference. And if you're going to be at the IBBA, and I encourage you to join, come, the benefits of the IBBA far outweigh the fees that you know, the membership dues. Way, I mean, like 3 or 4 times as much as what you pay for your membership, you get back in deliverables. Okay, but I'll see you at the IBBA in May coming up. Okay, so I'm going to throw it over to Jennifer. Did I get it done in time?
You did a great job. You did a great job. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for a moment. I'm going to let you pause so we can get some questions, more questions in. We already have some great ones. I'm going to read them in just a moment. I just want to go over just a couple things here again to remind everyone, if you have a BrokerWorks account or you're looking at getting one, or if you're an agent, these are your representatives. We have Jordan serving in the Midwest, Linnea in the Northeast, Robert's here to help in the Southeast, and my friend Isaac serving in the South, and then myself, I have the West Coast. So they could truly help you to learn a little bit more about your account. Perhaps your needs have changed. Perhaps you're a premium member and you're only being seen in 5 counties and you'd like to be found by sellers and buyers in up to 10. Perhaps you are looking to get a membership, or you're an agent and you're interested in getting an upgrade, a discount, you need more exposure for your business listings. Perhaps you need a second opinion. You're not getting the traffic that you thought you would. So reach out to your account rep. They're definitely here to help. Or if you or the admin or whoever's running your account needs training, maybe you have a large account, you have many agents, we're happy to put something together. We could do it via Zoom. If we're within the area, we'll definitely come out. We'd love to assist. And maximizing exposure, I think I already mentioned this for agents in the BrokerWorks directory. And lastly, many have thought they're limited to a number of listings on the platform. No, your listings can grow. You can have up to 200 listings on your account. Reach out to your account rep if you need for that to increase. And now I'm going to allow for some questions to come in. I'm going to read a few more. Thank you, Len, for everything. We're getting some really positive feedback. I have a great question here from one of our members. They're asking, how do you go about validating that any of the information on the buyer profile is correct?
Okay, good question.
Mm-hmm.
We rely on their representation. Just a minute, I've got this thing sitting over there. Good. We rely on the buyer representation as being true and accurate. Okay, and unless we're going to do seller carry, you know, and my client turns into Seller National Bank at that point, we don't do any additional pre-screening on the buyer. It becomes pretty self-evident when they can't put down a you know, earnest money deposit or subsequent deposit into transaction. It becomes pretty self-evident that they weren't being truthful. But you know, it depends on it. I mean, it's an all cash deal. You know, as long as they can prove they had the cash, you know, and proof of funds and all that, we don't care. It's fine. You know.
All right, perfect. Here's another great question. You're getting, again, Len, great positive feedback. How do you manage PE firms wanting to do diligence prior to presenting an LOI?
Okay, so that's the age-old question. And obviously, you know, it also, the related subject is, can you require a earnest money deposit from a strategic buyer or a private equity group? And the answer is no. And you need to tell your client not to be, you know, part of what we do as business brokers is about 40% of what we do is psychology. So establishing and maintaining buyer and seller expectations as they along, you know, initially and as they evolve during the transaction is very, very important to getting these deals done. So one of the initial seller expectations is, hey, you've got a big business. Chances are the buyer's going to be, they're not going to do an asset purchase agreement right away. They're going to do a letter of intent. And in the intent, they're not going to offer you any deposit at all. You know, and they're going to say, well, all this time and effort we spend doing due diligence, that's the skin we have in the deal. So don't expect it. We're not going to be able to rub the porcupine backwards. They come the way they are. And, you know, it's too painful and you're not going to do it. So first of all, that's the case. The second thing is they'll want to see a whole bunch of information without making a commitment. Well, let's face it, folks, an LOI is exactly that. It is a non-binding, most of the time, LOI. The only thing they're binding are the subsequent use of the material, the maintenance of the confidentiality post LOI. So if they walk away from the deal, they're still not allowed to use the information. Okay, all I can tell you is this. The LOI is like kissing your sister. It really doesn't mean anything. It is not a binding. You can, and I always remind them of this. Hey, if another pretty girl runs by and makes an offer to us, okay, that's better than yours, guess what, dude? We're going to say, hey, we wish to terminate our LOI because it's mutually cancelable, right? Both parties can cancel. It's not binding. And so is that what you really want? Okay, if I were you, I would get serious about this and start acting like a buyer. But just know that on an LOI, if you're not going to go to an asset purchase agreement, we can walk away from this at any time, just like you can. Now, the problem is they're going to ask for a standstill and all these other things, take it off the market and all that. And the question is, do you want to, you talk to your client, have your client make that decision, tell them the pros and cons. So the answer is, do you let them do due diligence? I'm talking about big professional buyers before they make an LOI. No, I don't. I have make express interest. And if there are parts of it that depend on what they see, when they see the real data, remember, they've got a real serious valuation and a real serious confidential business review that I pre-answered every single question that they would have. That's the objective. Okay, so they have one hell of a lot of information before they make their LOI.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much. Here's another great question. What are some of the red flags that you see from buyers, essentially, essentially that walk away from those specific buyers? What are some of the red flags that you see from buyers, essentially walk away from those specific buyers? That's what they wrote.
Okay, I'm not quite sure what that means, but if you're saying what are the red flags that I walk away from the buyer,
I think that's what they meant.
They walk away from the list. Okay. Well, if they can't prove they're ready, willing, and able, remember, go back to that slide. Okay, later get a copy of these slides, obviously. Okay, go back to that slide and you'll see the criteria that we use. Are they ready? Are they willing? And are they able? If they do not meet those and the specific standards that you make, you and your client and the third parties make on that business, if they don't, then do not spend any more time with these people. Okay, so there are lots of red flags, and that has to do with whether they act like a real buyer. Okay, real buyers are flexible, they're willing, they'll give you information and so forth.
Okay, all right, very good. Oh, here's a great question. Do you request a copy of the potential buyer's driver's license with the NDA?
No, but they're going to have to produce that at closing, that's for sure.
Okay,
what am I going to do with the driver's license? I mean, can I run the driver's license? Am I going to have a private investigator investigate them and all that, do, a credit check and all that kind of stuff? Probably not. Later, they are definitely going, especially if it's Seller National Bank, they are definitely going to have to cough up a real net worth statement. And if they're getting an SBA loan, if you guys haven't seen what the SBA, the preferred lender's application looks like, I mean, they pretty much have to take off all their clothes. I mean, it's amazing. Okay, so I let the lenders, in that case, do the real heavy duty qualifications.
All right, great. And let's see here. How about this? How do you handle the situation where a buyer sends back the signed NDA but refuses to fill out the buyer profile or fills out the buyer profile with limited information?
Okay, that's two questions. If they don't fill it out, I send back and I said, until I get this, you can sit in a corner until you're good. Okay, that's it. Okay, in other words, they get nothing until they comply, because I'm running this deal, not them, right? And I'm the gatekeeper. If they only give me partial, and then I would go back to them and say, why are you unwilling to supply this information? In other words, I want that information. It's a matter of, are they going to dance in one step or two steps?
Okay, great. Len, can you discuss earnest money and when does it or does it not apply?
Okay, I have an entire webinar on this subject. Okay, so all right, earnest money. Okay, as I said earlier when we were going through little war stories and stuff in the webinar, okay, don't expect to get an earnest money deposit from a private equity group or a big strategic buyer. Okay, it's against their religion. They're just not going to do it. Okay, they're going to say, oh, we spent all this time hiring people to do forensic accounting due diligence, and you have all this time and effort. You should be happy that that's what you're getting. Okay, so you have to manage the expectations of your seller, obviously. Now, for Main Street businesses, we suggest, okay, it's up to my client what they accept. We always suggest that with the asset purchase agreement, okay, with the offer to my client. Okay, let me stop here. Okay, first of all, I don't know if you ever thought about this, but it is true, folks out there. Okay, maybe this is something you never thought of. Okay, there's the SIM or the CVR. That's the offer to sell that to the buyer. No, we do make an offer. It's in writing. It's in that book. That's what we'll take. That's how much we want for it. That's the terms we're willing to do and all that stuff, right? Okay, but because we always think, well, the buyer makes the offer to the seller. Well, they do, maybe the formal written offer, okay? But in that offer, we suggest that the minimum earnest money deposit to accompany the offer be 5% of the total purchase price offered. So if it's $200,000, that's going to be a $10,000 earnest money. It's fully refundable most of the time, not all of the time. Okay. Fully refundable if they decide by the date certain, which is the end of due diligence. It's a date certain. On or before that date, one of three things is going to happen, right? They're going to extend by mutual consent. That's mutual consent of both parties, or they're going to decide to buy the business, open escrow, or they're going to terminate the deal, the offer in writing. Then one of those three things has to happen. If they terminate, they get their earnest money deposit back. Now, anything less than 5% of the total purchase price as an earnest money deposit, that's completely up to my client. Okay, whether they'll accept that offer with less money on it. Okay, and you know, we what we do is we have a deal with we're in an escrow state, so we're allowed to use an escrow company to handle the money. I've never had a trust account, even though I'm allowed to have one in the state, but I don't want to get audited by the real estate division. I don't want to be the advocate for the seller and I'm holding the deposit. Come on, you know, you're just asking for trouble. Okay, so I have a escrow company who would like to get, do the deal, if we close. Okay, they like to handle the closing. Okay, so they'll open a preliminary escrow during due diligence and they cash that check and put it in the bank. In the old days, my first 5 years of operation, 2000 to 2005, all we did was hold that earnest money deposit check in our file in the office and never got cashed. Well, the buyers get hit to that. They go, well, there didn't have to be any money behind this. Or if I decide not to do it, I'll just stop payment on the check, right? That doesn't happen.
All right, we're getting some really great questions here, Len. This one comes from my good friend, Brent. If an inquiry comes through with an email address and a phone number, do you feel there is value in following up via email only, initially before ringing them? For us and strict confidentiality with our winery, we really need to control the dialogue first so that nothing slips through the conversation, which could expose the identity of our client.
Okay, so I do the first part of the question, something about writing.
Correct. If an inquiry comes through with an email address and phone number, do you feel there is value in following up via email only before calling them?
Yes, that's the way we always use. We always follow up just an email because remember, 50% of them you never hear from them again. So there's no use getting all involved in calling them and getting into discussion and conversation. And by the way, they'll never figure out who the business is from me. I mean, let's put it this way. What are we selling? The tangible assets of the business, the hard assets, and the intangible assets. What can be destroyed? What can the value be destroyed by breaching confidentiality? Do the forklifts and the trucks and all that stuff care? They don't care that the thing's for sale. But do the trained employees, the vendor relations, and the customer relationships and everything, those intangible assets that don't show up on the balance sheet, those can be really diminished. So we always bring up confidentiality to our seller, to our client in the very first meeting before they ever talk about anything. And we talk about confidentiality right away. Even in an introductory letter, there's discussion of confidentiality. And we tell them we care about it more than you do. You're the one that's going to breach it if it gets breached. Okay, we don't leave our business card around. Don't, we many times, goes off the subject a little bit, but many times we have established a special Gmail account with our seller that only it's just between the two of us. Okay, so that nobody can intercept it or anything. So we keep it all confidential. Sometimes we will give, I can think of 3 big transactions we did with public companies who were worried about, people finding out they were looking at a certain company, insider knowledge and all that. Okay, where we gave a code name to the project. And we never mentioned the name of the business till the very end. Okay, in any of our correspondence, so that no matter what, if people went through their trash, they couldn't find out that they called it operations, in this case, Silver State, which happens to be Nevada is the Silver State. So go ahead.
All right, correct. We just have time for just a few more. This one is, can we verify with the lender with their approval or ability to close the deal?
Yes. Okay. The lender is going to be SBA. I mean, we never have done deals financed through anything but an SBA or a private individual lending them money. Okay. So the lender does that dirty work for us. They're the ones who vet the buyer financially in that regard, with regard to the money. Okay, now, do we get a proof of funds? Will we follow up on it? We call their contact of their banker. Will we get a copy of, if they say they have a whole bunch of money in a Merrill Lynch account or whatever? Yes, we get a copy of the latest statement of the Merrill Lynch account. We do a proof of funds.
Great. This will be my last question that I'll read out loud, and then the others will have Len respond to you.
Well,
This one is.
I thought you were just going to think about them then.
Oh.
Go ahead.
In describing the screening process leading up to receiving a written offer, is this written offer you're referring to an actual LOI or offer to purchase? Or do you seek an earlier informal offer prior to agreeing to take them through the due diligence phase?
All right. So I have an entire 3 webinars on that subject. So, all right. So the answer to your question is, like I said, a term sheet. Okay, I didn't say this, but I will tell you, a term sheet, they only come in handy. Don't ever negotiate against yourself. Okay, a term sheet is something you can run it up. It's a synopsis of what I would offer if I was interested in it, right? Okay, and so I might run a term sheet up the flag of my seller and see if it flies. Okay, if it's close to the deal, maybe slightly different terms than what I know they would accept, but I never negotiate against themselves. I always say I want something in writing. Okay, so a term sheet, forget it, it's not an offer. It's just a little list of terms. Okay, the second thing would be a letter of intent. Like I said before, a letter of intent is not binding on, most of the time, not binding on either party. So it's not an offer. It's just a concept. Okay, if I like what I see, then I might do this. Okay, but it's cancelable by either party. So that's a problem for the buyer, as far as I'm concerned. And I tell them that is a problem for you, because we can get out of this deal anytime we want. So you need to go to a written offer, an offer for purchase or an asset purchase agreement as soon as possible. Now, on small deals, we never accept anything except an asset purchase agreement, a contract for sale, which is completely contingent upon the seller verifying the oral and written representations that have been made to them in the CBR and on the phone and everything else, and in the valuation. In other words, remember, I wrote course 206 for the IBBA, managing the due diligence process. So I can tell you right now, you need to get them through the due diligence process. And obviously, at the end of due diligence, they're either going to terminate in writing, they're going to extend by mutual consent, or they're going to open escrow. And at that point, by the way, we didn't discuss this, we require them to put an additional large deposit that is non-refundable unless the unresolved contingencies that survive due diligence cannot be resolved. Otherwise, they've committed to buying the business.
Perfect. Len, you're getting a lot of positive feedback. Everyone is so grateful. Thanks. And of course, we're very grateful to have you all with us today. We very much appreciate you. Of course, people are asking where can they get a copy of the buyer profile forms, and just to clarify, these forms will be available to them, correct?
Yeah, I don't know what you guys do with them, but yeah, they're available. if I didn't send them to you already, I will send them as soon as we get off the phone here. How do you know where they go to get those? I don't know. I mean,
I believe they'll be available on the content that when we send the recording out, we make the webinar available to those that missed it or would just like a copy of it.
yeah.
If I am correct, the forms that you're providing will be attached there. But again, if otherwise, I will let everyone know.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I don't mind at all. That's why I included them. I want everybody to be a little more sophisticated in dealing with buyers that are generated by Biz by Sell. Okay. So
Wonderful.
all the forms, you go ahead and use them all you want.
Thank you, Len. Thank you again, everyone, for attending. We look forward to the next webinar. We wish you all success and everyone have a fantastic day.
See you
Thank
at
you,
the
Len.
IBBA.
Yes, take care. Thank
Good
you. All
day. Bye-bye.
right, bye.